Last week, the ONS announced that economic activity fell by 25% during the COVID-19 Great Pause. With lower tax revenues and multiple emergency spending measures, the result will be a much higher level of national debt than we expected just a few months ago. But how high is this rising tide of red ink likely to go? And what are the implications for tax and public spending? Our new report explores plausible scenarios for the path of the public finances in the years ahead, to shed light on what we should and what we should not be worried about. Three conclusions emerge. First, despite the unprecedented costs of the economic policy response to COVID-19, debt piled up in the acute phase of the crisis is not a big concern. On a reasonable central case, we can expect the national debt to approach 120% of national income next year, from less than 80% at the start of the year. But if the economy bounces back to its previous strength, and that's a big if, that debt pile would fall away quickly, without any need to change existing tax and spending plans. Second, we should worry a lot more about the scale of any long-term damage to the economy and take action to minimise it, even after the acute phase of the crisis is past. In our worst-case scenario, deep, permanent damage to the economy could see debt return to levels last seen in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War by the end of this decade. Given the historically low interest rates the government can borrow at, even such eye-watering debts would be affordable. So the government should err on the side of removing support for the economy slowly during the recovery phase, rather than withdrawing it too quickly and exacerbating long-term damage. Being penny wise would be pound foolish. Third, once the acute and recovery phases are over, the major risk to the public finances is that higher debt levels leave them vulnerable to increases in global interest rates. Our analysis shows that it would be unwise to tolerate high debt levels on an ongoing basis, without setting a long-term path to bringing them down. If interest rates started rising from 2025 to reach historically normal levels by 2040, debt interest payments would rise rapidly, exceeding post-war records substantially. On our central case, this would require almost £50 billion of annual tax rises or spending cuts just to stabilise the situation in 2030, and then further subsequent tightening of almost £70 billion a year to keep it under control. This would be extremely politically painful. Finally, the government's fiscal rules are too rigid to allow this flexible response. In the absence of a very rapid recovery, the Treasury's current rules would require it to tighten fiscal policy quickly, risking damaging confidence and undermining the recovery. We propose a more flexible, all-weather fiscal framework that would allow fiscal tightening to wait until the economy had recovered and the scale of long-term damage had become clear. This would minimise the risk that premature fiscal retrenchment would exacerbate economic damage. It would also set us on a prudent path to ensure fiscal sustainability in the long run.